Welcome to Weekly Talkback. I'm Kevin Beers.
And I'm David Witten.
And this is the show where we get to talk to Pastor Dave about his message on Sunday. This week it was October 22nd, 2023. And the name of the message was The Ark Comes to Town. And the main thrust of your message was all about how we praise God.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to hit on the point I wanted to first get into was this whole idea of praising a particular way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we know that all our different Christian traditions, church traditions, are very different in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
And many denominations feel they have the truth
Mm-hmm.
on the
Mm-hmm.
proper way to praise God.
Mm-hmm.
But your message really went against that idea.
Correct.
Because basically what you ended up saying was, if you're doing it in the service of God,
Mm-hmm.
you're doing it right.
That was the message. You got it.
Okay, so I guess there's none to discuss.
Okay.
So why? Well, let me ask this: why do you think there is such a hold in so many denominations as to thinking there's a particular way? Well, do we do it as a church ourselves?
Well, I think the Church of the Brethren, and our congregation specifically, holds to a certain line of thought when it comes to the proper way. I don't know how churches have come to hold the various traditions they hold in praise and worship. I'd have to give some thought to that, so I don't really have a response to that. But I do know that most churches, really feel strongly that their way of worship is the right way. And I was just challenging that. And I was challenging that more for the reason that as churches diversify and grow perhaps in ways that are outside of the box. In other words, Church of the Brethren has been traditionally a white Germanic group of people. Because most of our roots go back to Germany. But now, as the denomination starts including Haitians and Dominican Republic brethren and brethren from Africa, the Caribbean brethren worship God differently. Mm-hmm. And so it challenges the more stoic white Germanic brethren to reconsider what it means to really praise God. And I guess that was the whole point. You started out with a question or a comment, and I think I probably went around it. But I think that was the purpose of my message, was to challenge congregations like ourselves to consider that we don't have a handle, or we don't have the exclusive rights mm-hmm. on how to praise God.
Well, the Church of the Brethren for many years didn't allow musical instruments.
Correct.
And yet, from the very passage you used, David is dancing, they're playing the musical instruments, they're doing all these things. How could the brethren ever say musical instruments
are not allowed or shouldn't be allowed? Yeah, it's a fantastic question.
It doesn't make sense. Now,
no, it doesn't.
It did lead to a tradition of four-part harmonies, which carries through to today, even mm-hmm. though we do use musical instruments also. But, so something good came out of it, I would say.
Yeah.
Because that four-part harmony, for those of you who may not have attended a service or seen our worship service, we often, if there's 4 verses in a song, the third verse will often be just a cappella in the 4-part. And if you go back and listen to it, it comes through. The congregation mm-hmm. in traditional brethren style really bang on those those harmonies. And it's excellent.
Yeah, it is. It's wonderful.
So in that way, but because when you contrast that with like praise and worship type style mm-hmm. music, everybody just sings the melody, mm-hmm. which can also be very moving. Now, I personally like the 4 parts, mm-hmm. Mostly because I get to sing. I get to sing the bass part, which is the part that doesn't make any sense usually. It's like
no, I like it.
I think when music or composers write music, it's like, oh, we got the melody, that's the soprano, we got the mm-hmm. The harmony that goes with that, and that's the altos, and
Yeah.
the tenors kind of ride this nice thing. It's like, what did we miss that we need somebody else to sing? And just plug it in, and because the bass part rarely makes sense to me.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
but I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. As a matter of fact, if you listen to yesterday, we did Praise God from Whom, which is a Mennonite tradition. Comes from the Mennonite tradition, which is, anytime I preach, we will always sing that song. That song every single time. Actually, when people see that I'm going to be preaching, like, are you going to be doing that one?
Yeah.
So anyway, but yeah, that was the whole point of your message, was as long as you're praising in service to God, you can't be praising wrong.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I mean, I guess, the story goes that King David was half naked when he was praising.
I always thought he was fully naked, but
Oh,
either way,
depends which translation you use.
yeah, I guess. But because one of his wives, or
Yeah.
one of the women,
Yeah, I think it was
said,
one of his wives. I
how-
forget which one.
but she was the traditionalist. Like, how could you do that? Like that's so embarrassing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's a good scenario with what we're talking about today in praise and worship versus more traditional styles of music. Brethren, they cling to their hymnals. They don't want to let them go. And I have been in churches over the past few years where you don't have a hymnal in sight anymore. So we're reluctant to change our music, and I guess yesterday's service was a bit of a challenge to that we need to be a little bit more open and flexible with our styles, particularly since our minister of music comes from a completely different style of worship and is starting to introduce some things that might make the standard typical brethren squirm a little bit.
Yeah, well, I was sitting in the back rocking out with her because I really enjoyed. And then you did the special music, which was kind of a bluesy.
That was more bluesy.
Yeah, which I don't typically like blues, but that was that fit very well for me. So that was actually good. The last point I wanted to get into was the story you told about the Taylor Swift. The Taylor Swift tickets.
Yeah.
So it's a conference, and people are there, and they have praise and worship service. And I take it was relatively subdued. That is the way I kind of interpreted the story.
Yeah.
But afterward, someone announced they had Taylor Swift tickets, and they were super excited about it and dancing around and basically praising Taylor Swift in a sense.
Yeah.
And other people joined in.
Yeah.
So why do we do that? Because I've noticed a lot of people, when it comes to, like, they can recommend their favorite restaurant, they can recommend their favorite movie, they make recommendations all the time for different things, but if it comes to church, we don't talk about that. We don't recommend that to anybody. Now, does that come from this idea, like my parents always told me, never talk about politics, religion,
or sex?
Yeah, okay, those are the three you never talk about.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. But it does make you wonder why our praise in church is so subdued, and how our praise is not so subdued in more secular situations. I don't have an answer for that. I don't.
Well, now, if you look at the Brethren tradition, it tends to be subdued because we seem to have this there's a right way to do that. And in the Church of the Brethren, that means do it very quietly.
Yeah, reverently.
That kind of thing. But I went to a conference, and there was a praise and worship service, and people were raising their hands. I raised my hands. Now, if you know me, that would be so far outside my character, because I'm an extreme introvert. I don't just let myself go. But when I raised my hands, it was so freeing.
Wow.
And it was a whole different experience. That's the best I can explain.
That's interesting.
I just got swept up in it once I got outside the box. Because this was not a Brethren conference. This was
obviously.
But what it did for me, because in your message you say movement
Mm-hmm.
is part of praise,
Mm-hmm.
and which I never connected. And I just simple movement, and
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden it's like music had different meaning. Just everything changed.
Wow.
It was now when we're in our church. When I'm not working in the back, it's hard to get out of it because no one else is there doing that sort of thing.
Right.
You know.
Right.
Now we had some guests here yesterday who their hands were up in the air, and you could just tell how free they were with that praise.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow. And there's times I think, I wish I could do that. And it's like,
Yeah.
you did it before, you could do it again.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think personally, there's an intellectual and an emotional aspect to praising. You certainly want to, know who you're praising and why you're praising God. But then there's an emotional quality to it that we brethren don't really incorporate well into it. And again, I said something about, David and his entourage dancing in the street as the Ark of the Covenant was coming in, had three aspects to it. It had song, it had musical instruments, and it had movement. Dance. He danced, and there is something freeing about being able to move your body to the rhythm of whatever music it is. But music, I mean, seems to be probably the most important aspect to praise, wouldn't you say?
I would say yes. I mean, I use music to process emotion because I'm not really good with emotion. But music can help me deal with the emotion that I can't just deal with otherwise. And I find music, I mean, we have a discipline in science of music therapy.
Right.
Or I guess we would say healthcare. But music therapy is a way to help process. It helps children process emotion too. Now, I'm not saying I'm on the emotional level of a child, though some would argue. But it really does help me. Well, when you're specifically in high school and you're listening to the love songs and stuff, and you're going through puberty and all these new emotions are coming on you, the music really helps you process what you might be feeling.
Yeah.
Now, I find it to this day, I'm no longer going through puberty. Hopefully I'm a few years past it. But music still helps me process. Music will actually manipulate my emotion too.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
That sort of thing.
Definitely.
Anyway, that's where. Anything else to add?
No, that's good. That's a good way to end.
So if you didn't get to hear Pastor Dave's message from Sunday, it'll be down in the description. Just click on it. You can go listen to it. I would encourage you to go see the entire worship service, specifically the music, to hear that 4-part harmony. Typically on the third verse is where we do it. It's just such it's how we brethren really do put our praise out there. And we will see you next week.
Take care.